Welcome to Ask the Coaches. My name is Pilar Alessandra, and I'm the instructor and script consultant here at the On the Page Writers Studio. I am also the author of the Coffee Break Screenwriter and the host of the On the Page podcast.
Hi, my name is Jen Grisanti, and I'm a story career consultant at Jen Grisanti Consultancy, Inc., a writing instructor for Writers on the Verge at NBC, a former 12-year studio executive, and the author of 3 books: Storyline, Finding Gold in Your Life Story, Change Your Story, Change Your Life, A Path to Your Success, and TV Writing Toolkit, How to Write a Script That Sells.
Hi, I'm Lee Jessup. I'm a career coach for emerging and professional screenwriters. I'm also a consultant for Universal's Writers Program and an author of 2 books, including Breaking In, Tales from the Screenwriting Trenches.
So one day, the 3 of us were out to dinner and we had an idea. You guys want to tell everybody what the idea was? Seemed like a great idea at the time.
Well, the idea really came from questions, right? We all get a lot of questions all the time. So we thought, wouldn't it be great to hang out, answer your questions, give you a little extra if you were asking one of us, get some more answers from others, and kind of spend a Saturday afternoon that way. So here we are.
I love it. Yeah. I love the idea of getting the different worldviews, and I also love the idea of it coming from the 3 of us because of the different ways we approach our businesses and the different highlights we have with what we do. So hopefully we'll be able to answer as many of your questions that you sent in.
You sent in a lot of questions.
Boy, yes. A lot of questions. These came from Twitter, they came from Facebook, and other sort of social media kind of things. We gathered them together. We have a little basket here, there you go, and we will be picking randomly from them. So should we go for it?
Yep, Pilar, why don't you pick the first one?
Oh my goodness. All right. Why don't you read this one? Go ahead.
All right. Everyone says that each character has to sound different from the others, but no one says how to do it. Please, an answer to this question will not only make my day, but my year. Thanks in advance, and for the record, we are choosing to keep these anonymous.
Right, just for everybody's privacy. But I'm very glad I can make somebody's year because I've got some answers for this.
Hey.
And as far as making your voices distinct, so here are a couple of tips. The first thing would be to think about what language your character speaks. Yes, they speak English, possibly, but do they also speak the language of their profession or stage of life? So you could think, does somebody speak screenwriter? Does somebody speak comic book geek? Does somebody speak lawyer or doctor or soccer mom? So their profession or stage of life. So that's one way. Another way to find a distinct voice would be to think about their verbal rule. This is not what they say, this is how they say it. So some people are one-word answer people. Some people are monologuers. Let's not have too many of those in your script. Some people swear. So what's their verbal rule? The third thing would be to be okay about doing a fantasy casting in your mind. When you fantasy cast, when you pick a star that has a specific voice in your head, not only is the voice going to be different, the line will be different. So try those 3 things: profession or stage of life, their verbal rule, how they say things, and also your little fantasy casting, and that should help you find distinct voices.
And just to add to your fantasy casting thing, if you take pictures of your fantasy cast and you put them up above your computer or wherever you're writing, or just make it your screensaver or whatever it is, it'll keep those voices alive and present for you. So I love that.
Also, I would say, I love those 3 things, and I love what you mentioned. The 3 things I would think about are habits is one thing. Like, I look at shows like The Night Of, and you have the lawyer who has the issue with the foot, and what he does habitually because of that. That separates his character. And then you want to think of things like, what is the wound that drives your character, and what is the flaw that gets in the way? And how does that inform how the character behaves? Because when you know that, that separates your characters. And then I would just say, watch television and watch feature films and look at what is done that really draws you into a particular character, and ask yourself why you're drawn to that character.
Okay.
All right. Jen, would you like to pick our next one?
Yes. All right. Let's see. Very good. Why don't you take it?
Okay. How many act breaks in a TV pilot for platforms like Netflix and cable TV?
So the interesting thing is there are 4 and 5 act breaks. I actually had someone just post on one of my private group pages, oh no, I just studied with someone who gave me the 4 act break, and yet that doesn't seem to be mainstream. And I said, no, in cable, the 4 act break is still utilized. It used to be used in television across the board. But then different networks started going to different act break systems. ABC went to the 6 act breaks. I would say across the board, the teaser plus 5 acts for the drama is the most used amount of act breaks. And then from what I understand, for the cable shows that do have act breaks, it's either 4 act breaks or 5 act breaks.
All right. And I think, I don't know if you agree, but when you say that even when you're not seeing actual act breaks in the pages, that
You
it's
have
still
to write
good.
toward them.
Right. You need to
Yeah.
be thinking in terms of this because it's just good storytelling. Really.
Yeah.
Twisting the story, twisting the story, twisting the story. So just because you don't see it here
Yeah.
doesn't mean you shouldn't be thinking
Totally
it there.
agree. Yes.
Yeah, just to add on to that, keeping the act breaks or not on the page is cosmetics, right? It's how you choose to present the work, but there should still be that rising action, those decisive moments in every script.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go for it.
All right.
I think you're.
It's my turn?
Yeah.
All right. What is the essential element of a script that makes it stand out for the programs, competitions, and for getting repped?
So I have given a lot of thought to this. I mean, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is strong content, period. Then if I were to think of one essential element within the idea of very strong content, it would be emotion. I'm going to tell you when I staffed shows and I would have 300 scripts behind me, the things that I would remember when I read a script were the ones that affected me emotionally, and the ones where the writer understood how to use theme, symbolism, and message and took the writing to the next level. So when you're applying to the writing programs, I would say when your essay and your emotional truth links with what you write about, then that is a plus. And that goes into emotion being a great essential component of the scripts that get chosen in the programs.
I will add on to that from the point of view of representation, because I think in representation it's also about the pairing of the writer and the script. So what kind of person you are, what experience do you bring to the table, how does that personally relate to the material that you've written, even if it's only thematic or inspired by, it's clearly, you don't have to go and write everything that you know in order to access new worlds, but we are looking for those new worlds, and we are looking on the representation front to see how the material really pairs with the writer and how cohesive the two are going together while being standout, unique, something that we haven't read before.
Sounds good.
All right,
Moving
you're up, my
on.
lady.
Next question.
This is so exciting. All right, what do you got? How do you suggest aspiring screenwriters with little industry experience break in and get hired as assistants or writers?
That's loaded. Well, let's talk about assistants first, because in my experience, there is no apply here button, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's really assistant jobs come from networking, from getting to know showrunners and executives and writers who are themselves assistants in the room who might one day may get the call to move up to staffy and need to fill in that position very quickly by somebody who they trust. So I don't find that you have to come to LA and have all of those relationships. If you are a TV writer, it is advantageous, if not necessary, to be in Los Angeles. And then you just want to go and meet people and talk to people. I mean, I have somebody who just moved to Los Angeles after the holiday break having networked effectively into an assistant job. But it is a who you know kind of situation, because you have to remember that when something goes up on Facebook that a show on TNT is looking for a new assistant, everybody and their mother is reaching out to the showrunner, to the writers in the room, to anybody they've ever met. So you're not going to be the only one. So you do want to network, and you do want to have people kind of throw your name in the hat and vouch for you and speak for how effective you'll be, so that the hiring of you becomes very, very easy. Now, in terms of becoming a writer in the room, that's even more loaded, simply because it's really tough to get your first job in the room. For every writer who's ever gone up for a staffing assignment, for their first staffing assignment, if they weren't an assistant in the room, the biggest criticism will be, well, you've never been in the room before, so we don't know how you'll perform. Fellowships are great. Representation is certainly helpful. Going the assistant route is something that works for many. But there isn't one sure path for staffing on television. I can tell you that there's a lot of relationship building that goes into it, a lot of advocating, and a lot of writing really great content that gets people wanting to work with you.
You've got to have a killer script when it all comes down to it. Because even if you have those relationships, even if you get your foot in the door, if your content is subpar, well, they'll go with somebody who has a better script. And that's why you always want to be working at your craft.
Yeah, you should always be writing. There should never be a moment where you feel like, well, I have these 3 great scripts now, I'm done. Mm-hmm. You're not done until you get your job, and then you keep working on your next thing so that you can create your next opportunity. But in the room, and Jen, I think you have a lot of experience with this, it's the material on the page and it's the personality in the room, and whether or not the person is able to contribute in the room.
It is. I mean, I think definitely for the writer, it's like a matchmaking thing. Like, you're essentially looking at, not only does everything have to be working on the page, you have to have great chemistry in the room. And you have to be open, and you have to be accessible, and you have to be someone that people can imagine putting with the showrunner, where they're not going to throw them out the window after 10 to 12 hours of being with them. Right. So your personality and what you share in the room is very important. I think as far as getting assistant work or PA work, or writer's assistant work, adding on to what Lee mentioned, is I recommend. Now, what I learned was that the gatekeeper to those jobs is the assistant to the vice president of production at the studios and the networks. So the assistant to the vice president of production is the person who first hears about the writer's assistant job, the PA's job, the assistant to the executive producer. So I tell people, I mean, when I got in the industry, I didn't know anyone. So cold calling was something I did a lot. I went to the Hollywood Creative Directory. So if you were to call a studio or a network and say, I'd like to talk to the vice president of production's assistant, and they switch you over there, then just say, hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm a writer, and I'd love to be considered for future work positions. Can I email you my resume? That is definitely one way in. Now, I'm not saying everybody should call one place or anything like that. But I am saying that going on relationships being everything, and going to every event that you can go to, so those doors open. But that is one channel to think about.
Find that person and suck up to them.
Yes.
Exactly. All right.
Jen, let's go.
All right. Okay. Let's see. Okay.
What are some tricks to the effective use of POV in an ensemble series?
Okay, so worldview is something that I have been so immersed in, because I know when I'm reading scripts and when I'm watching shows, if the worldview, if I feel it to such a deep level, then I recognize the talent of the writer and the story with that worldview. With an ensemble, what you have to recognize is, even in an ensemble, you have one character driving your A story. So you're going into the worldview of that character. You're not going into 5 characters' worldview evenly. You're going into the worldview of the main character driving the A story. That is the worldview that we should know the most about. Now, you can definitely give us glimpses of the other character's worldview, but you want to stay focused on that. A great show to look at that kind of rotates worldviews, which is new, which is where story is evolving in the business. It used to be that if you go into a series through one worldview, you often stay with that worldview. Well, Atypical on Netflix actually stays in the worldview of the autistic boy, but then it goes into the worldview of the mother's emotional reaction and the sister's emotional reaction in episodes where they're more dominant than in the previous episode. So it's a great example of showing you, yes, you can have an ensemble cast, but you're in your pilot episode. You're still going into the story through one worldview that is your main worldview.
Another thing that you might want to think about when you're opening up your series beyond the pilot and thinking about the series and the point of view of the other ensemble characters would be just to do a basic log line of what you believe their story is for the series. When you look at the series through their lens, you'll know what they want in every scene, even if the driving story is still the A story, main character story. So that would be a little tip. Just do a little log line from every character's point of view.
That's fantastic. All right, next question.
All right. Wait, who's picking? I'm
I don't
sorry.
know.
I just picked.
You just picked.
picked.
I read, you picked.
It's all happening
Oh,
so
that's right.
fast.
I picked, you read.
We always have to be fair here. Okay, let's see. Lee, what are the best kind of questions to ask managers when having a general meeting?
So many. You want to ask, when you're meeting with a prospective manager that you're considering signing with, you want to first of all understand what do they do, what do they not do. So what is within the purview of their job? Do they develop their writers? Do they not develop their writers? Do they develop extensively and exhaustingly? And do you have to, are you able to write an act, to write a draft without their involvement? Do they need to see every page? It's just about how they work and whether or not that works for you. It's also about where you want to go as a writer, so understanding what they do and what they don't do. Do they get involved in staffing? Do they not get involved in staffing? Do they favor features over television? Where are their relationships? I find that it's actually really good before you go into meetings with managers to see if you can find other clients who are repped by that manager, to ask them some questions about how the relationship works. Always great to ask, what do you expect from me as a writer? What do I expect from you as a manager? How can I be a good client for you? So that you really start to understand the makings of this relationship and set the expectations properly. Oftentimes, I will hear people who will go and meet with representation and say, oh, we've had a fantastic meeting. Okay, what about A, B, C, D, E? Oh, we didn't talk about any of that, but we loved each other. It's very important to love each other, and it's very important to get along and be excited about the person who's representing you, because ultimately they're your advocate in the professional space. But you have to have an understanding and an agreement about what is the general trajectory of that relationship. What do they expect for you? What can they do for you? What are they willing? What do they think is right for you? What are you interested in having for your career? Because just because they're a manager and you're a writer doesn't mean it's going to be a love match every time.
I love everything you just said. Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest thing, like when I look at what you have to recognize is this is a partnership, and so it is also knowing that these people are representing you out there. So I tell writers when they say, well, what do you do when you have three managers who are equally great? How do you decide? And my feeling is one of the ways you decide is how they respond to your work,
Mm-hmm.
because they are marketing you out there.
Absolutely.
And if they're not talking about specifically, this is what I loved in your script that you wrote, and this is how I think I can market you because of the way you write. For me, those are like key things to be aware of. And if you're in a meeting where you were told they read your script and they don't mention anything about your script, then that's a note to take. But it is really being clear on what you want. before you go into the meeting so that you can communicate this and figure out if it's a fit. And it's a mutual process. I mean, it is not a process where you're going in begging for someone to validate you and represent you. It's a process where you're going to work together in a partnership to get an outcome that you both want and is going to benefit both of you.
I actually want to add on to what you said about what happens when you meet with three great managers. I have a client who is a very desirable working writer who met with two different companies and really was going back and forth. Both companies put out, I think, 2 managers in one, 3 managers in the other, were courting her very heavily. And we had a conversation about what decision to make, right? How do you know? I've asked all the questions, I sent emails, they love my writing, how do I know? And the reality is that with managers, like with most people, just like in relationships, you don't know for sure in the beginning, right? You have to give your relationship with your manager at least 6 months before you really know where it lands. Hopefully everything works out, but you have to understand that you won't always know for sure. There's no way of guaranteeing it, and a lot of it is just making sure that in the beginning stages, you are in agreement about the quality of your work, about what needs to happen next with the work, about what they're willing to do with that work, about what they're expecting you to do in order to move things forward.
Yep.
Good advice.
All right.
All right.
I'll pick one.
Yeah.
Let's see. What do we have? What is the different approach between a limited series and a series?
So the biggest thing to look at with that would be when you're writing a feature, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. When you're writing a television show, you're supposed to feel by the end what show number 100 is. God knows where that came from, but that is the expectation. When you're writing a limited series, you're kind of taking an approach in the middle, in that you have a beginning, middle, end that could be 6 episodes, 7 episodes, 8 episodes, 10 episodes, and you're mapping out your story with that intention. Now, it's interesting with limited series lately because when you look at shows like The Night Manager that started as a limited series and then suddenly there was interest in making it into a series. So I almost think it's good even if you're writing a limited series, that there's an element that could be open to a series if there is a choice or a decision to go there. In Night Manager, what I thought was interesting in the script, they talked about the fact that Jonathan Pine was hired by the city to watch over it because of him coming out of the military. And had that been developed more into the story, then you would have understood that once the season 1 case was solved, situation was solved, that there could still be an engine of story coming because this is what his job is.
If you want to sell your pilot in the American market, wouldn't you say that it might be wiser to pitch it as a 1-hour drama rather than as a limited series, considering the amount of platforms that actually do limited series or the amount of companies that actually do it? That it seems limited for the people who do limited.
It is limited, but it's trendy. There are limited series that are hitting in a big way. So in that sense, it separates the approach from it just being a regular series. So it depends on the concept, whether the approach is better to just approach it as a regular series versus a limited series, and thinking about what will sell more. Obviously, with a limited series, if you want big stars, it's going to be to the advantage that you have one season for that big star to get that big star. So it just depends.
Got it. So do your homework. If you're
Absolutely.
meeting with a production company, make sure that they do limited series, that they have, A-list actor potential before you say, well, this is limited and therefore so are your options.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at outlets like FX, they do a ton of limited stuff. AMC has done some limited stuff. HBO's doing a lot of, well, I mean, Big Little Lies started as a limited series and then is now
It's now a
expanded.
series.
Yeah, it was
So
based
it's
on a
like,
book,
oh,
and the book is
We
over.
made lots of money.
I
Maybe
know.
it's not so limited.
Yeah, so you certainly want to look at the outlets. I think for new writers, I wouldn't recommend writing a limited series.
I agree.
New writers really have to not only convey their craft and their elevated level of content, they also have to convey an understanding of how the industry works. Everything I hear about new writers writing limited series, it seems to be a little frowned on, a little bit, or frowned upon, because it seems precious in some way. So one of the things that you want to convey, and what we always hear from executives, right, when they're reading a pilot, is what's the series. And so that's one of the areas by which a pilot from a new writer is being judged. And because of that, I would say stick to the full series.
Okay, good advice.
All right, Pilar.
Oh, it's me. Okay. Oh, why don't you read that?
While rewriting, how do you get through reading your entire script over and over again? I already know what's there, so always catch myself skimming or skipping around.
Well, the first reread, you should be, reading it as though you're the audience for it. Is this meeting your general intentions that you had when you first started? So you get a gut reaction as to what the main rewrite really needs to be. I loved it, except for my character wasn't developing the way it was supposed to be. I loved it, except that the dialogue wasn't popping. That first gut read tells you a lot. But after that, it is absolutely fine to be skimming around, because you are going to be hitting your rewrite element by element. It may not be that you start a thorough read from beginning to end. So give yourself a break and think about, what does your script really need, hit those elements, and move on.
Great answer.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
All right, we got a couple more.
I am picking next, so let's see. When you write a musical, what's the best way to describe, or how specific should be the choreographies? I feel I just can't write "they dance this song."
No, you can't write "they dance this song." So remember your similes, right? They dance like, okay? They break into a musical number with the passion of, okay? So having a simile, that can help right up front. Another thing to do is talk about the emotion of the scene, right? They dance to express their feelings of desire for each other. First tentative, and then eventually racing toward each other. What that does, write better than that, but what that does is it evokes an emotion, but it also evokes a certain pace.
Yes.
Starting slow and building, and it makes for a fun read as well. So yeah, just emotionally dig into those musical numbers. I love musicals.
Pilar.
Okay. All right. What do we got? What are the challenges to those over 40 or 50 who are attempting to enter this crazy business? Thanks.
There are definitely challenges, but I think they are dependent on which area of the business you're looking to write in. So if you're looking to staff for the first time and you're not staffing with a particular expertise, right? You're not a doctor, a lawyer, an EMT. You're going to 911, the Fox show, after being a 911 operator. It's going to be tougher to get into the room as an older person without writing experience or expertise that come into the room. And I think that's really truly where the barrier is. With all of that, I do have people that have gone in their definitely in their 40s and a few in their 50s. For me, features are more anonymous when it comes to age. I've never heard of a script not being picked up because the writer was too old on the feature front, because with features, all the business is on the page, right? There isn't, where will this be in 10 episodes? What do we have to do with it? Worst case scenario for an older writer is if they are indeed perceived as everybody's great grandmother, the material is picked up from the writer and then given to a younger writer for a rewrite or something of the sort. I do find TV to be more of a younger person's game. I've seen exceptions, no question, and I work with many of them, and I'm very proud of them. But I think, where to me the big challenge is if you're looking to staff for the first time, I would say in your 50s, it's probably going to be challenging unless you're bringing an expertise with you that is appropriate for your show. Same with pilot writing. There's just a desire for people who want to be in the business for another 20, 30, 40 years. I met with somebody now a month ago who was in his late 70s who wrote a pilot and was somewhat disappointed when an executive told him to get out of the business. And he asked me why would the executives say that, and I tried to convey to him that executives are looking to get in business with a content creator. And I said to the writer, you're probably gonna want to quit in 5 years, right? And he was like, what are you talking about? A year, I'm sailing to Mykonos, I'm done. And I said, exactly, that's the point. Executives are looking to build relationships with content creators who will be in the game for a long time so they can do many shows together. So I find features to be more forgiving. I do find avenues in for older writers because I've seen it happen more than once, more than twice. But if you are looking at the business from the lens of here's my age, what is my best prospect, if you think in features and if you're comfortable in that, I would say try features first because they tend to be a bit more anonymous and a bit less about the writer.
Well, let's talk about, though, what you do write, right? When people are writing original stories, they need to draw from life experiences. The older you are, the more life experience you have, the more expertise you have.
I totally agree.
So often, especially when we're trying to find things these days that pull from sort of a self-IP, like this is my story, I own it, this is something that happened to me. Writers who are over 40 have those life experiences. So definitely for feature, that could be an advantage.
Absolutely.
For TV, as you said, you're talking about building a career, right? Just building a career in anything, you often start, with young people in every career, so they have, years and years and years and years and years to build up. But selling an original pilot, if you have a particular expertise that is only yours, isn't impossible.
Not at all.
So again, we're talking about building a TV career versus coming in with selling something. So those can sometimes be different animals. So don't be discouraged just because
you shouldn't. I mean, listen. The truth for me is that most of my writers who've broken in while I've worked with them have been in their late 30s into their 40s and sometimes in their 50s. I met with a manager right before the break and we were talking about advice to writers and different life stages of writers, and she had mentioned that she was working with a young writer who was very talented, but then the writer hit a wall, right? They really couldn't write the next thing, and kept asking, well, what should it be? What should I write? What should I do? And she said, go travel, go fall in love, go live life, and then come back with some experience and let's see what it does to your writing. So to your point, life experience is critical to great writing that will help you surface, that will help you break in film and or television.
And someday when we're in our 40s and 50s, we'll feel this way too. Right.
However, I am going to throw something in that, when I worked on a show, NCIS, when I started staffing for that show, the average age was 55. And
really?
Went up to, the showrunner was 73 at the time. So my feeling is, if age is a barrier, if you make it a barrier.
I agree.
My feeling is the longer you live, the more you have to write about. And the longer you're writing, I'm in total agreement that if you're coming from an expertise, if you're coming from a story that is so vividly yours, and because of your age, you really understand how to tell this story, then don't get in your own way of an outcome. So trust me, if I had my way, I would say every staff should have a writer over 55. That's
awesome.
Just my opinion.
You heard it, it's on tape.
Absolutely. No, listen, I have a writer who broke in his late 50s. No, people may talk about his age. He has never given his age a second thought.
Yeah.
It does not get in his way. It does not bother him. It is not a conversation. And that's just how he handles it. I do feel the writers bring age into the room much faster than anybody else does. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've had in their early or mid-30s telling me, oh, I'm worried that I'm getting too late to break in. That is not at all the scenario.
Yeah.
And I do think that these are barriers that often writers put in place for themselves long before the industry even considers it.
Yes. Because the thing you have to recognize is most people don't know your age and they can't ask your age.
That's
so,
right.
So
they can't ask your
yeah,
age.
they cannot ask your age. So
Terrible idea.
yes. So you have to have the confidence, have the content, but also know, as both of you have touched on, like if you're 50 and you're just approaching a writing career, then the idea of writing a feature or an original pilot versus staffing are stronger ways to go.
Yep.
So it's just taking that into consideration.
This has been wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you
much
so
fun.
much. This has been, I'm so glad we did it.
I know.
We went out to dinner, came
Yes.
up with an idea, we got to answer some questions, and we still have more in there.
So many.
Which means that we have to get together and do it again.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to thank all the writers and filmmakers who sent in questions to us. When we do it again, we'll ask for some more, and of course, we'll hit the ones we couldn't today. I want to remind everybody to go to onthepage.tv. That is my website where you can take classes, you can learn about the podcast, there's consultation things, blah, blah, blah. Onthepage.tv, I'd love for you to join me there. What did you guys say where they should go?
To get to me, you go to jengrisanti.com and you can learn about, I have an upcoming teleseminar that I do every year. I have training series, I have classes, so the website is the best place to get the latest events, and then of course my one-on-one consults.
And with me, you can go to the radically different LeeJessup.com to sign up for coaching, to look at my books, to check out a bunch of videos that I have there, including some interviews with managers that I've done this past year that are super fun.
Cool.
So you know where to find all three of us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a happy 2019. Right?
Yeah, happy 2019. Bye.
Bye.
To all your dreams.